I started this whole project selfishly, kind of like Tim Ferriss did with a lot of his projects. If you've ever read or done some of his stuff, a lot of where his stuff comes from is he's trying to answer his own questions, is what he's really trying to do. And I have struggled with, for a long time, I can't say my entire career, but for a long time, I've struggled with this idea of, am I an entrepreneur? Am I an employee? Which is the best route? Which is the safest route? All those things. And you're probably laughing because you've struggled with the same decision. And that's one
Absolutely.
of the reasons. Yeah, cool. Well, that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you. I figured as I started to write the book, I decided to turn it into a book. And as I started to write it, I thought it can't just be me talking. I need other people and their input. And so I did the survey, and then people who had really interesting answers I wanted to talk to. So that's kind of why we're here. I can tell you that I already have my own answer, which is intriguing.
Pretty surprising that we have our own answer before we ask a question.
That's where I am. I have my own answer of what I am and probably the path for me, at least for now. Yesterday's interview with a fun guy named Cannon Patillo that I can connect you with if you ever want to chat with him. He had one statement that just knocked my socks off and convinced me of everything further. What I will tell you before we get into your questions and is that, Jim, it's been intriguing. There are so many people I've talked to. You know, most people who have day jobs want to be an entrepreneur that I talk to. They just feel like they'll have more control. They can make more money. All these myths, by the way, which is probably also why you laughed just then. They think it's a better route for them. And then they get into it. And what I thought was going to be hard was finding people who had gone the entrepreneur route and wanted out. They wanted back to the corporate life. I thought that was going to be the hard people to find. Lo and behold, that's been the easier people to find. The people who have said, wow, this just isn't for me. This just is too much. Cannon's a great example. I don't want to talk too much about his personal life, but he did a startup. He raised a whole bunch of money. And now if he can't raise some more by December, I can't remember the date he gave me, he's done. He has to quit, or it's going to be financial distress for his family. So I'm not to discourage you on your journey at all. I'm just being a realist about this whole thing. And so this whole thing of entrepreneurship is brutal. It's tough, right? The costs of starting a business are down in today's world, but everybody's starting one, whether it's true startup, high growth startup, or it's someone just starting a YouTube channel, things like that. So I've been exploring all of this and finding all kinds of fun information that I'm happy to share with you when this is all over with as well. So I wanted to dive into your answers. And the first one I want to talk about is that I've also started at with other folks is the question I started with was, tell me about yourself, right? And you may not remember your answer, but it was Christian, husband, and father. You are one of 3 people who actually answered first when I asked that question you spoke about things that are non-professional. Everybody else straight into tell me about yourself. I'm an entrepreneur, or I'm a banker, or I'm this, or I'm that. Had nothing to do with family. Most answers, they didn't even mention that at all. And you are the only person who mentioned your spiritual or religious beliefs first. So tell me what it was about that sort of came out first, that, I'm a Christian and I'm a husband and I'm a father, that kind of thing.
It's kind of how I approach life. My faith is first, and then my wife and my kids, and then work. Work for me is just a way to finance the rest of the other things.
So good.
I try to work to live rather than live to work.
Yes.
So that's why I lead with that. And I try to be real transparent when somebody asks me who I am, because that is at my core who I am. That's how I define who I am.
I love it. So I'm curious, that begs the question then, how do you respond when someone says, what do you do? Do you still answer with, I'm a Christian, I'm a husband, I'm a father, or does it then shift
When
into
people
professional?
ask what I do, I kind of tailor it to what I'm doing at the time. So when I was a banker, I'd say I help people finance their goals and dreams, or
Yep.
I
Yep.
help people fulfill their dreams, or something like that, or change their lives. I help people change their lives. That's one of the things I like to say, because that's my goal when I help somebody, is that it does change their life. It does have an impact on them. Because otherwise, what are we doing?
Yeah. Yeah. So you sort of start with, it seems like a mission at the time, whatever the mission is at the time, the thing you're trying to accomplish, the pain point you're trying to solve. When someone says, what do you do? That's really where you start. It's not, I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer. But
No,
do you go ahead?
I did. I did for a long time. I was a banker, and because for me that was new. That was something that was to be held in high esteem. It was professional. I come from a very blue collar background where, nobody in my family ever wore a suit and tie to work.
Right.
And so, but then as I got through it, I read some books, watched some people. Well, in 20 years, when you're no longer a banker, what are you? When you peel that away, that can change. Fintechs, all these different things competing to crush the bank. Well, what about when the banks don't need you? Everything's robo-advisor. So then who are you? Well, if all you are is a banker, you fall short, in my opinion. If all you are is your career, and Americans, I think, are terrible at that. I mean, and I tell people all the time, like when I'm doing my sales coaching, a financial advisor can also, everybody has their preconceived notions of what a doctor is, whatever you name that thing, everybody has their preconceived notions. So you don't really get to define what you do or who you are when you just respond with your profession. So that's why I try not to respond with that profession.
Is there any part of you that agrees that question, what do you do, particularly, I can only speak as a male. I don't want to speak for the females, right? But as a male, it tends to be the eternal measuring stick. What do you do, right? Do I have a better title than you? Do I make more money than you? Do I do all these things? Do you identify with that statement?
Oh man, I think it is. It's a measuring stick, and that's what everybody. And it's funny to see the responses from people too. Way back when I was at I won a corporate trip, whatever, and when I said I'm a personal banker, because there was only a very small handful that were at that lower echelon that were mingling with district managers, regional vice presidents, all these big wigs, right? So that their face went from, oh, what do you do, to, oh, congratulations, see you later. Yeah. It was no longer, you weren't on their playing field no more.
Right. It wasn't quite prestigious enough. It was, but you and I both know it was, but to some, depending on their title, it was not quite prestigious enough. So it is this eternal measuring stick. But yet people like yourself, what I love about it is you still hold on to those core values and mission of, well, that may be my professional life, but at the end of the day, what defines me is Christian husband, father, that kind of thing. So I was looking through this, and one of the other sections I cover with everybody is, what did you want to do when you grew up, right? What did you want to do when you were a kid? Do you remember what you put?
I probably put NFL football player.
Yeah, you put pro football player. That's right. And so I will, before we get into that, it won't shock you probably to know that the vast majority of people that answered that question, what they wanted to be when they grew up, when they were a kid, what do they want to be? None of them, next to none of them, actually are what they wanted to be when they were a kid. I actually met one and it was Cannon, who said he wanted to be a soccer player, and lo and behold, he was a soccer player for a very long time until he got injured and couldn't do it anymore. But so I'm curious, do you remember what was it about being a professional football player that was so appealing?
Well, it was the only thing I knew. I played football from I was 9 till I was 19. I walked on at UT.
Okay, this I didn't know. Cool.
It was the only thing that I knew from a career standpoint. I only went to college so that I could play football.
I got it.
When people talked about, well, what if you don't make it? It never crossed my mind that I might not make it. I was one of the top tacklers in my state. I thought it was, I was all this and all that. And I didn't listen to the few people who said, you got to work really, really, really hard to make it. So when I got to UT, they were just, I think, 02. So they were 4 years removed from national champions. They were number 4 in the nation at the time. So everybody who was there was the best in their state. They were the best at where they came from. So I was competing against a lot of guys who had as much experience, were as talented, and worked harder. So that didn't last very long.
What did you like about football, Jim? What was it that appealed to you so much?
The same thing that appeals to me about business, competition.
Okay. Yep.
I love the competition.
Competition.
Yeah, competition, working towards the win.
And I'm curious, is that competing against others or yourself or both, or what is it about competition?
Well, it is against myself, but yes, against others. I want to be the best I can be, and if that means if I don't get a win necessarily against somebody else, as long as I did my best, I'm okay with that. There's satisfaction in that.
Right.
If I don't do my best and lose, then I'm not too satisfied with that. Even today, when I go out there, I'm proposing and making presentations. If I get the presentation, great, as long as I did the best job I did. Right. If I don't get it because I made an error, I messed up, then that's a different introspection to take a look at.
Where do you think that comes from?
I don't know, man. I see it in some of I have 3 daughters, and one of them has it, like, she just is as competitive as she can be, and the other 2 not so much. I don't know. I think it's inherent to some degree. I think you can develop it, and you can develop a drive, but I still think it's an internal mechanism of some sort that,
to some extent, you either have the starting point or you don't.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. And so you just like to compete. Was there, you can compete in a variety of ways. Was there any particular reason it was through football, or is it just what you were exposed to, or?
It was what I was exposed to. I was hanging out with a kid one summer, and he was a little bit older than me, and he said, August rolled around. He said, I'm going to football practice. I said, hey, Mom, Dad, can I go play football?
Can I go to football practice?
So I rode my bike to the football field and started, playing football.
Yeah.
At 9 years old, and then again played till I was 19. So.
Talk to me. Is there any aspects of the team part that you enjoyed, or had you ever thought about doing something that was more just individual?
I liked the individual piece of, my part of it. I was probably a little selfish and didn't really focus too much on the team aspects. But I like the camaraderie and the kind of the fellowship that goes with it. Didn't really appreciate it at the time. Looking back, I can see that I appreciated it and liked it, but didn't focus on it while I was in it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course. Yeah. Sometimes it's all hindsight is 20/20, and you don't realize it at the time. So I'll give you a little bit of the punchline with the research. You alluded to it yourself. You said, I love the competition. It's one of the things about business that I love is the competition. And so that's one of the things I am finding. So the example I always give is Anita Lane. If you know her, she's a district manager for a local hotel chain. And she wanted to be a psychologist when she was young, right? What a interesting thing for a kid to want to be. But she had an aunt that was a very successful psychologist, and she wanted to be like her. And lo and behold, she's in the hospitality industry. And you would think, well, they have absolutely nothing to do with each other. But what I'm finding is it's not so much the title or the industry or the job that someone wanted when they were a kid, and then they become something totally different as an adult. What I am finding is actually this tie between maybe more the traits and skills that come with that thing you enjoyed when you were a kid. So for you, it was the competition, and now that's carried forward into the business life. You still like the competition, and you're finding the ability to compete regardless of whatever the title it was that you were, right? So, yeah. When I got to know you, you were a banker, right?
Yeah.
Enjoyed that. I'm kind of, for those who can't see, I'm kind of, doing my hands because us bankers got to stick together. It's how I started my finance career too. When you answered the survey at the time, you were working for somebody else, and now you're sort of doing your own thing. Can you walk us through, walk me through this thought process of being a banker? I mean, what was it about the industry and what was it about working for someone else at the time that you went that path, and now you transition into, well, I'm going to take a shot at my own thing?
Necessity for both. So when I became a banker, prior to becoming a banker, I was unemployed for 4 months, out of college, 09, 10, So it was a really tough time to
Tough market.
search for a job.
Yeah.
Tough market. I remember going in, it was my second round of college, and um, everybody was saying, you're getting signing bonuses out of college. You're going to make all this money. It's going to be great. And that was in '07.
Right before the crash.
Right before the crash. So as I was getting ready to leave school, '08, '09,
Oops.
they said, stay in school as long as you can. There are no jobs.
Yeah. Especially
Right.
not in banking, right? I mean, everybody was panicking. The banks were all on hold for everything they were doing.
Well, I didn't get my banking job until 2011. So I
Right.
graduated in December of '09. I didn't get an actual job in logistics, which was my field of study, till August of 10. And then I lost that job 2 weeks later. They said I didn't fit. That's a whole nother story. But
Yeah.
so I was unemployed, applying for jobs. I applied for 120 jobs and finally got a teller position with Fifth Third. So I was able to, and that's where I launched from. So it was out of necessity. And my first day of work, my manager takes me to the back office and he says, hey, if you do A, B, and C in 6 months, you can be here. In a year, you can be here. In 3, you can be there. And so it was pretty appealing to see a career path laid out, which I had never had before.
Right.
So that all of a sudden there was this bright, hopeful future that I didn't see before. So it was kind of neat to see that. And so I said, yeah, that's me. I want to go for that. And then as I was doing it, I found out I was good at it. I liked it. I liked helping people. And so all those things were really appealing.
Right. So when I asked you in the survey, I said, which one factor motivates you the most? Do you remember what you put there?
I don't.
Security. Yeah. Which is interesting. So let's talk about that for a minute. So the timing of the survey when you did this, actually it's only been maybe a few months ago, right? You were working for somebody else. The one factor that interests you professionally was security. Based on what you just said, that makes sense. You come out of school, it's hard to find a job, and now you find one where you can actually grow, and growth usually means some security and things like that. I am going to jump us forward a little bit. So security is the one factor that motivates you. The second factor that motivates you would have been flexibility and schedule. So I'm wondering, is there a tie in these answers between why you went from I'm a banker and now I'm going to go give it a shot on my own? Because, if your primary factor is security, giving it a shot on your own may not be the right answer. So just walk us through that thought process a little bit.
Sure. They certainly don't line up. There's no doubt about that.
But the flexibility does, right? The flexibility does.
Yeah, the flexibility is nice. Being able to sit here at 9 o'clock in the morning and not have anything else planned is great. That's not always feasible when you're in a traditional corporate setting.
Right, 8 to 5, you're reporting to an office, all these things.
Right. So what caused that was an adventure I took. I went up to Maine as a banker, and that was part of something my wife and I wanted to do. And my house in Knoxville didn't sell. So not being able to do both for too long, my wife came back, she was going to repair the house and sell it, and that didn't pan out. So when I made the decision to come back, we were in limbo for about 3 months, where I was working in Maine and my family was living in Knoxville. So during that time, I had an opportunity to train one of my client sales associates. And I really enjoyed it. I said, man, I could do this. This is something I could do. And as I was going through that, I started thinking that the people the clients I served, that's what I loved about banking, is helping the client. And I found that big banks do a wonderful job of training their employees and getting them to where they can sell and have a good conversation. Whereas the community banks do a better job at focusing on the customer service and the personal care of the client.
Yeah.
So I wanted to bring that sales skill, relationship management skill, to the community banks and to the smaller institutions. So that vision, again, you spoke earlier about a mission. So it kind of started with that. And then I had some success early on. I just came back to Knoxville, said, you know what, I'm going to take the leap. Part of what I said I was faith. And I believe that the Lord's going to provide whether I'm there or here. And so I took the leap, came here. Within my first few weeks, I signed a client. He re-upped and signed another contract. And so there was some, small proof of concept,
Right.
This could work. which that propelled me into saying, what, I can go for this and stick with it. But like you had mentioned, a lot of entrepreneurs think, oh man, I need to get back to the corporate life. So the lack of security does make me think about going back to the corporate life.
Got it.
I love the entrepreneur life, and if I land a few more contracts, grab a few more clients, I could see me doing this very long term.
Right.
But like your friend who you spoke of earlier, who if he doesn't have something pop pretty soon, he's going to have to make a course correction or a turn. And
right.
I'm kind of at one of those. I'm getting to one of those crossroads myself. So
right.
I can completely understand that.
It's just not easy. It's just not. So I'm curious if I ask you this question, where you fall. So is one path more secure than the other? Is the corporate grind, the corporate ladder, or the entrepreneurial grind, is one more secure than the other in your mind?
Oh, absolutely. The corporate is by far more secure.
So working for someone else is more secure.
Yeah, there's no risk.
And more risk where?
Literally, there's no risk.
No risk.
In working
okay.
for somebody else. Yeah. All you have to do is show up and do your job.
What about layoffs? There's no risk of layoffs?
Yeah, there's risk of layoff, but it seems to be minimal, especially right now.
Okay.
But even still, if you look at the vast majority of all people, right, only a small portion get laid off, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of the workforce in America, let's say that even if 1 million people got laid off.
Yeah, depending on the industry, it can be, if you look at government, the stats say it's under 0.5%. Even in some of the worst industries, it's 2%. 2% of the workforce gets laid off.
So I don't feel there's a lot of risk in that. And so, yeah, I see the security, every other Friday you're getting a paycheck, or once a month or once a week, whatever your paycheck.
Right. The paychecks don't bounce. Yeah.
Yeah, but they're coming in. As an entrepreneur, you can do your job, do it really well, and still not have a paycheck on Friday.
Right. So, talk to me about the desire for flexibility. How does that mesh with sort of where your professional choices fall?
The flexibility is huge. I mean, I love it. And even when I was choosing, even as I was choosing jobs after I got into banking, I wanted ones that lent themselves to flexibility. Mm-hmm. Having the autonomy to, if I needed to go see a ball game at 3:00 or go do something, I wanted to have that flexibility to be able to do that. So,
right,
it's a pretty big role. Even if I do go back to the corporate setting, I'll want something that's flexible.
Did you see your banking roles as having some flexibility? Because I know some of the roles you were in, like the ones I had in previous careers, you weren't, flexibility can be seen different ways. And in my term, it was not being at a desk. It was, going around, driving around, making calls and going to networking events. Did you consider that flexibility?
I did. Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons it's cool too. So one of the things we haven't touched on yet is, you are a husband, you are a father, and I'm curious where sort of those relationships tie into your professional decisions, your career choices, and things like that. Have they forced you one direction versus the other? More so, how has that come to play? For example, this choice to kind of go entrepreneur for a while, how has that played with, husband and dad?
Well, it's added a lot of time for both of those. I have, again, the flexibility that, when I'm done with this, I can go spend 30 minutes, an hour with my family that I wouldn't have had otherwise. So that's nice. And if I were in the middle of a contract and serving a client, I wouldn't have that.
Right.
But, there may be there's lulls in it, at least what I do. There's times when you're creating business, and then times when you're doing what you go out there and sell.
Right.
So there's some of that adds to it. I would say it's the motivating factor. The wife and
so the family is the motivation.
Oh,
either way, whether you're corporate or whether you're entrepreneur. Yeah.
Absolutely. They're the drive. They're the reason I go out there, and it's part of the grit, to want to provide for them and do things for them.
So a really direct question, you can dodge it if you want, not a problem, but I'm just curious. You've been interested in entrepreneurship as long as I've known you. And you're now going that direction. being husband and father, has ever that held you back from chasing entrepreneurship? Because the answer you gave for what would have stopped you from being an entrepreneur was fear. I'm curious if any of that fear is just fear of providing for family. How does that all tie in?
Oh yeah. I wouldn't say it holds me back.
Okay.
Um,
Is it
you
ever a
know,
reason to do entrepreneurship?
never.
It's not. Okay.
No.
No, I
Mm-mm.
see.
Every entrepreneur I know works more than they did when, at least successful ones work more than they did when they were in corporate world.
Great point.
And as I become more successful, the hours will increase.
Yes.
I'll be, driving and to and from and being inside the business that I sell my services to.
Right. Right. So when I asked you what the best parts of working for yourself, you said every day is different.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things you seem to really enjoy with it. That sort of also ties back into the flexibility to some extent. The worst part was being 100% accountable to yourself, right? So you got to
Yeah,
look in the mirror every day.
yeah, absolutely. You can't take a day off. You can't. I mean, you can. I don't work on Saturdays or Sundays, but you really have to be intentional with your time and really focused, because if you squander it for too long, you're done. You
Right.
know, I see people in the corporate office. They can sit there and play on Facebook. They can look at the news for a few hours, because at the end of the day, they're still getting their paycheck on Friday.
Right.
A lot of them. So your actions have to line up as an entrepreneur with your goal, or you're not going to get there.
Yeah. So last question I really have for you today is I'm just curious, you're sort of like myself, both live in both worlds to some extent in the past, or do you see a future where maybe you're back in the corporate world depending on how things go, but would you, if that happened, would you continue to side hustle, as they call it, to scratch that entrepreneurial itch? How do you think that might look if you went down that road?
So when I was a banker, when I would talk to business owners, I'd always tell them I'm an entrepreneur at heart. I just don't have the stomach for it.
Uh-huh.
That's what I would always
Interesting.
say. The series of events have kind of triggered a time where it's because I need some immediacy.
Mm-hmm.
So that, as I had a little bit of success when I first started, that propelled me to say, hey man, I could really, this could launch, and one or two really good sales, and all of a sudden I'm in business.
Yes.
Uh, so so yes, I may end up back in the corporate world. While I'm there, I'm always going to be, even when I was in banking before, I was always thinking of different ideas and ways to execute other things. So yeah, sure, I would definitely entertain things and look at them to see where there were opportunities.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, that's all I had, man. It's really great stuff. There's some good nuggets in there. I can't wait to sort of re-listen to this and parse them out. I suspect that you'll fall. I wish you the best of luck with the entrepreneurial side. It is tough. I suspect no matter what you do, I think what I'm learning, give you a little bit of the punchline now. What I seem to be learning is what most people I've talked to is that the best of both worlds is very appealing. If you can find a company that allows you to scratch whatever that mission is deep inside you with a little bit of, actually what it seems to be coming back to, Jim, is the word control, right? Whether it's flexibility,
Yeah.
security, whatever it is, it all seems to be coming back to, can I have just a little bit of control, right? If I'm 8
Right.
to 5, I'm in a cubicle, I'm tied to a phone, I'm, all these things, then they tend to be, I wish I could be an entrepreneur, right? And then they do just like you did. They go that direction and they find out, this isn't quite as what I thought it was going to be, right?
Yeah.
Cannon's another great example. Cannon read a lot of books, he said, before he became an entrepreneur the first time, and there was nothing that could prepare him for what it's like to run a business. And so what seems to be the answer for most people that I've talked to is if they could find the best of both worlds, which is really hard. But you go to work for a company that provides you some security, that regular paycheck coming in, but gives you a little bit of that flexibility, a little bit of that control, the ability to chase after whatever your internal mission is. It doesn't matter what the vehicle is entrepreneurship or employment. It's just as long as I can chase after that mission and have a little bit of control. And then if there's enough entrepreneurship inside you somewhere, then they still maybe side hustle on the side, or they just do something creative. Because the one thing you and I haven't talked about is actually the top choice of, on average, of all the people, of the top factor was the ability to express myself. That's actually the top factor. So it's, yeah, right. It wasn't money, wasn't even security, wasn't any of those things. It was the ability to express myself. And then number 2 was money. Believe it or not. Yeah. Not flexibility.
Oh, I believe that.
Yeah. Right. Cause you got to have it. So it's been very interesting. It really seems like it's sort of this best of both worlds. If you can find it, it goes a long way. Yeah. Pretty cool. I can't wait to,
cool.
I've written a lot of the book. I've got about, I want to say 30,000 words done. I've probably got another 20 to go.
Yeah, I'm in that same space. I'm almost to 40,000 on my book.
Okay, cool. So, what are you writing?
I'm writing a book for Christian men, how to love their wives.
Awesome.
Biblical integration, as well as a lot of practical application. I think it's easy to miss some of the obvious things. So yeah, and intertwining some personal stories and things I've seen along the way, and so yeah.
Very cool. I appreciate you spending some time with me.
Thank you.